The day I laid my husband to rest, I felt more than just his body was leaving with him. It wasn't only the crushing weight of grief that choked me, but a frozen dread in my chest, a suspicion moving among the flowers and the soft whispers. Because while everyone else wept, I saw something that turned my blood to ice. My daughter-in-law, Vanessa, leaned over the casket, and pretending to stroke the lapel of Elijah's suit, she discreetly slipped a small object into the inner pocket. Her hand trembled for barely a second. No one else noticed. I did. For an instant, I doubted my own eyes. I thought the pain was playing tricks on me, that maybe it was just a tissue or a metal, but no. The look on Vanessa's face was too deliberate, too cold, and the way she glanced at my son, Marcus, afterward, was that of someone who had completed a mission. I was frozen still. The pastor continued the service. The incense rose in pale spirals, and the words about eternal rest felt hollow. All I could think about was that brief, secretive movement, that hand hiding something on the body of the man with whom I'd shared 40 years of my life. When the ceremony ended and everyone moved to the adjoining reception hall for coffee and condolences, I stayed behind, alone in front of the casket. The silence was so deep, I could hear the creaking of the wood. The smell of melting wax made me dizzy. Then I took a step forward, my heart pounding so hard I was afraid someone might hear it. I leaned over Elijah. He was so quiet, so impeccable in his navy suit. His face looked like a man at peace, but I knew, as only a wife knows, that his stillness wasn't serenity. It was a mystery. I slid my trembling hand into the jacket pocket. My fingers touched something hard, rectangular. I pulled it out carefully. It was a precisely folded white envelope, and on it, handwritten, was my name, Celeste. The world seemed to stop. My breath caught. I tucked it into my purse, checking all around to make sure no one had seen me, and pretended to adjust my black scarf. A few minutes later, they closed the coffin, and with that dull thud of the hammer on the lid, I knew the real burial was just beginning. On the ride back home, the highway seemed endless. The car moved through the evening mist, and every thought was a drumbeat in my head. What had Elijah meant with that envelope? And why had Vanessa, my daughter-in-law, been the one to place it there? Was it a message from him or a trap from her? I didn't want to open it yet. I clutched it against my chest as if it contained the voice of a dead man. When I arrived, I put my purse on the dining room table. The lights were off, the house silent. Everything smelled of fading flowers and emptiness. I sat in the chair where Elijah used to read the newspaper, and only then did I open the envelope. Inside was a sheet of paper folded in thirds and a small, dark metal key. The letter was short, written in my husband's firm handwriting. Celeste, if you are reading this, it means I couldn't do it in person. What you believed was yours never was. Trust no one. Sometimes the closest love is the one that wounds the deepest. I read those lines over and over, as if I could find the soul they had stolen from me between the words. The paper smelled of wax and earth, and the key gleamed with a dull sheen, as if guarding centuries of silence. I didn't sleep that night. Every shadow in the house seemed different. Every corner carried a weight it hadn't before. The wind banged against the windows, and memories crept in with it. Elijah's laugh, his smell of tobacco, his youthful promises. I had loved him with every part of me, and yet now I doubted everything. When the clock struck 3 in the morning, I got up. I couldn't bear the uncertainty anymore. I took the key, placed it on the table, and observed it under the lamp's light. It was old, with the number 47 etched on the side. It looked like a safety deposit box key. And then I remembered. Weeks before he died, Elijah had said something strange. If anything happens to me, don't look for answers at home. At the time, I thought he was raving with fever, but now those words stabbed me like a knife. He knew something, and Vanessa did too. The next morning, my son Marcus called me. "Mom, how are you holding up?" "Fine, son, as best as can be expected." "Vanessa and I are coming over later. We want to talk to you." His tone was kind, but there was an unease in his voice that I couldn't quite define. "Of course," I replied. "I'll wait for you." I hung up, and my hands closed around the key. I felt a current of electricity run through my body. For the first time since all this began, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt alert. And although I still didn't know what that key hid, I knew I wasn't ready to share it with anyone. Because sometimes, when you reach into the past, what you find can be more terrifying than the silence itself. And I was about to open a door that would change my family's history forever. The morning light entered the window grayly, as if the sky also doubted what it should illuminate. That morning, the silence in the house had a new weight. The empty space beside the bed, the gap in the closet where his coat used to hang, the scent of cologne still lingering in the air. Everything was a cruel reminder that Elijah was gone. And yet, I felt him everywhere. In the clock that marked his rhythm of life, in the books he had underlined, in the coffee cups that still held his prints. But most of all, I felt his absence wrapped in questions. That key, that letter, that sentence written in his hand. What you believed was yours never was. I sat down at the dining room table, where the morning light fell directly onto the paper. I read it again. Every word seemed heavier than the last. The cold metal of the key burned between my fingers. The etched number, 47, spun in my head like an impossible riddle. Mid-morning, Marcus and Vanessa arrived. The sound of the doorbell startled me. Only 2 days had passed since the burial, but their visit brought me no comfort. It brought me anxiety. Vanessa was the first to enter. She wore a fitted black dress, her hair precisely pinned up, her face serene, too serene. She kissed my cheek with a quick, almost formal gesture. "How are you feeling, Celeste?" she asked in a soft voice. "Tired," I replied, "but calm." Marcus hugged me without saying anything. I felt him tense, his muscles rigid. His gaze avoided mine. "We just wanted to see how you were doing," Vanessa added. "Elijah loved you very much." Her words were correct but empty, and her eyes, as she said them, showed not sadness, but something harder to name: caution. We sat in the living room. The clock ticked insistently. Marcus took my hand. "Mom, I wanted to talk to you about the will." "The will?" I asked, feigning surprise. "Yes, Dad left some things in your name, but..." He glanced sideways at Vanessa. "There are certain procedures we need to review." "Procedures," I repeated, tasting the word as if it were poison. Vanessa intervened, smiling with that courtesy that hurts more than a slap. "We don't want you to worry about a thing. We just want to help you organize the paperwork." "I appreciate that," I said, pretending gratitude. Elijah was always very organized. I'm sure everything is in order. I saw her stare at me for an instant, as if trying to read my mind. Then I understood. She knew that I knew something, and this silent game between us had begun. When they left, I closed the door and rested my forehead against the wood. My heart was pounding, as if trying to warn me that something was coming. I went up to the bedroom and opened the drawer where I had stored the letter. I took out the key and looked at it again. The number 47 was not for the house, nor for any box of Elijah's at home, but there was a bank, the same one where he had worked for years, that had safety deposit boxes numbered that way. I decided to go the next day. I felt nervous, but also strangely alive. After days of mourning and silence, I finally had a purpose. The next morning, I put on a gray coat, pinned up my hair, and took the city bus. The ride was long and noisy. I looked out the window at the streets, which seemed different, as if the world had distanced itself from me a little since Elijah left. When I arrived at the bank, the security guard at the entrance recognized me right away. "Good morning, Ms. Thacker. I am so sorry about Mr. Thacker," he said respectfully. "Thank you, son. I need to inquire about a safety deposit box." I went to the counter. The employee checked the records. "Do you have the key and the authorization document?" I took the key from my purse. The woman took it, looked at it, and raised an eyebrow. Box number 47, in the name of, she checked, Elijah Thacker. She asked for my ID, and after a few minutes, she led me to a private room. My heart was pounding in my chest. Every step along that carpeted hallway seemed like an echo of my own breath. The vault door opened with a metallic sound, and the employee left me alone. I inserted the key into the lock. It turned smoothly, as if it had been waiting only for my hand. The box slid out. It was small, discreet. Inside was a brown folder, a sealed envelope, and a black and white photograph. I took the photo first. Elijah was in it, younger, his arm around a woman who was not me. She had large eyes, a serene smile, and a familiar look that disoriented me. I didn't know who she was, but something about her face felt painfully known. I opened the envelope. Inside was a different will from the one Marcus had shown me the day before. The document was dated 1 month before his death. I read each line slowly, and my breath shortened with every word. I, Elijah Thacker, leave Serena Harper as the primary beneficiary of my assets. Serena Harper. That name did not exist in our family or our history, or so I thought. At the bottom, the signature was authentic, without crossouts, without a doubt. Elijah had done it voluntarily. I felt a mixture of anger and confusion. Who was this woman? A mistress? A long-lost relative? A business partner? And above all, why had Vanessa put the key in the casket? I left the bank with shaky legs, put the papers in my purse, and walked aimlessly through the streets. The city went about its business, indifferent to my storm. The noise of the cars, the voices of the people, the wind in the trees. Everything seemed distant. Arriving home, I locked the door and sank onto the sofa. I looked at the photo again. That woman, that smile, that familiar look, and then I saw it. In the background of the photo, almost imperceptible, was a girl about 3 years old, with light eyes and hair just like Vanessa's. A choked gasp escaped me. The photo slipped from my hands and fell to the floor. Because for the first time in my life, I was afraid of my own family. I slept with the photograph under my pillow, as if I feared it would disappear while I closed my eyes. And yet, I couldn't sleep. The image of that unknown woman, Serena Harper, and the light-eyed girl pursued me with every blink. There was something in her gaze, in the way Elijah held her shoulder. That didn't look like the gesture of a man with a lover. It was a more tender, more intimate, more guilty gesture. Dawn arrived without warning. I got up before the alarm rang, made coffee, and sat down at the table where the letter still lay. The coffee steam rose slowly, as if the air also knew that this day would change something in me. I spread the documents on the tablecloth, the will, the photo, the letter. Elijah's signature was real, and the date undeniable, 1 month before his death. If he had left everything to that woman, why had he never told me? And why did my daughter-in-law, Vanessa, have the key to that box? I decided to go to Elijah's lawyer's office, Attorney Lawson. I had known him for years. He was the one who helped us buy the house and formalize the original will, the one where everything belonged to me and Marcus. When I arrived, the lawyer greeted me with a courtesy loaded with discomfort. "Ms. Thacker, my condolences again. Elijah was a great man." "He was," I replied with a thread of a voice. "I need to speak to you about his will." "Of course. I have a copy here." He opened a filing cabinet and pulled out a green folder. "It says here that his assets would pass to you and your son in equal shares." "And what about this one?" I asked, placing the document I had taken from the bank onto his desk. The man adjusted his glasses and read it in silence. His face changed. "I haven't seen this before. Do you recognize the signature?" "Yes," he said after a few seconds. "It is your husband's, no doubt, but what? This document was never filed here." I knew in that instant that someone had been pulling strings. Elijah had made this will in secret, and someone else, probably Vanessa, had wanted to make sure I never found it. "Attorney Lawson, did you know a woman named Serena Harper? I asked. The man hesitated. The name rings a bell, but I don't know where from. Maybe from my husband's past? Could be. Elijah had many contacts, although that name... He frowned. Wait, check this. He checked an old filing cabinet, one with dust and yellowed labels. He pulled out a folder. Here it is. More than 30 years ago, Elijah signed a child support agreement in the name of Serena Harper. A chill ran through my hands. Child support? For whom? For a minor, that woman's daughter. The silence became thick. My heart began to pound fiercely. A daughter? I asked, barely breathing. Yes, but the girl's name is crossed out. It seems it was intentionally erased. My eyes filled with tears. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My husband, the man who slept beside me for 40 years, had a daughter with another woman and kept it from me his whole life. I left the office staggering, as if each step weighed a decade. The street seemed noisier than ever, full of voices that cut through me. I walked aimlessly until I ended up in front of the cemetery. The gate was open. I entered. The air smelled of earth and faded flowers. I stopped in front of Elijah's grave. The marble was still clean, the wreaths drying in the sun. I rested my hand on the headstone. Why, Elijah? I whispered. Why did you lie to me? There was no answer, only the sound of the wind moving the cypress leaves. I looked around, searching for strength in a landscape of the dead, and I found it inside myself. If you wanted to keep secrets, I said to the marble through clenched teeth, I will unearth them one by one, and when I have them all, I promise you, no one will ever use your silence to destroy me again. Arriving home, I found Vanessa waiting for me at the door. Her presence took me by surprise. Where were you? She asked in a tone that was half sweet, half controlling. Taking a walk, I replied without emotion. Marcus is worried. He hasn't slept since the funeral. Neither have I. She observed me with that look that seemed to want to pierce me. Did you find anything? She suddenly asked. What are you referring to? I said, trying to stay calm. I don't know. Sometimes people keep memories. Elijah had many. I didn't answer. Her words were carefully measured, but her intention was clear. She knew I had opened the box. You know, Vanessa, I said softly, there are things you think you know about people, but time always has a strange way of showing us what we didn't want to see. She smiled. That's true, Celeste. Time reveals everything. Yes, I added, even lies. Her smile froze for a second, and I knew with absolute certainty that I had hit the mark. That night, I couldn't stop looking at the photo. Elijah, Serena, and the girl. I observed the little girl's features again. The shape of her chin, the curve of her eyebrows, the defiant look. They were the same ones I had seen in Vanessa. The same sparkle, the same shadow in the eyes. My heart jumped. I brought my hands to my face, horrified. It couldn't be, but it was. Everything fit. The letter, the key, Vanessa's attitude, her presence in Marcus's life. It wasn't coincidence. It wasn't fate. It was a plan that had started before I even knew who she was. I closed my eyes and prayed, not for forgiveness, but for clarity, because something told me that what I was about to discover would not only change my life, but could cost it. The mind has a curious way of protecting itself. When something hurts too much, it hides it under layers of routine. That morning, I tried to pretend everything was normal. I made coffee, opened the windows, put on soft music. But there was no way to muffle the noise the truth was making, pounding inside me like a broken clock. The photo was on the table, staring at me. That 3-year-old girl with the same glint in her eyes as Vanessa watched me from the past. I didn't need a DNA test to understand. I knew it the instant I looked at her. Vanessa was the daughter of Serena Harper, and Elijah, my husband, was her father. I remained still for a long time, letting the certainty sink in. 40 years of marriage, and I still had secrets left to discover. I left the house without telling anyone where I was going. I took a taxi to the old neighborhood where my friend Loretta lived, a woman who had known everyone in the area for more than 40 years. She had been my confidant in difficult times. If anyone could help me connect the dots, it was her. Loretta received me in her robe, her gray hair tied up, and a look of concern. "Celeste, goodness, you look pale. What happened?" I sat on her sofa and told her everything, from the letter in the casket to the photo, including the will and the visit to the lawyer. She listened without interrupting, her hands clasped over her knees. When I finished, she looked at me with something between pity and fear. "Serena Harper," she repeated. "Of course I remember her. Did you know her?" I asked, feeling my heart race. "She lived 2 streets down from your house many years ago. She was a pretty woman, reserved, and Elijah helped her, or at least that's what he said. She was a seamstress. Your husband would bring her orders from his office, but there were rumors." My throat tightened. "What kind of rumors?" "That she had a daughter, and that the father was, well, you know who." "Elijah." Loretta lowered her gaze. "I never confirmed it, but they moved away suddenly. People said he bought her a house on the other side of town." I stayed silent. The words floated like knives, suspended in the air. Serena, the daughter, the house, it all fit. Upon returning home, Vanessa was waiting for me. I don't know how she did it, but she always appeared right when I least wanted her near. She was in the garden, watering the plants with a fake smile. "What a lovely morning, isn't it, Celeste?" she said without looking at me. "Depends on who you ask." She put down the watering can, dried her hands, and observed me with a calm, too calm expression. "Is something wrong?" "Only that I was thinking about your mother." The expression on her face changed for barely a second, but it was enough. A shadow crossed her eyes. "My mother?" she asked in a low voice. "Yes, Serena Harper." The smile completely vanished. The silence became dense. I could hear the lemon tree leaves falling one by one. "So you know now," she finally said. "You didn't intend to hide it forever, did you?" She didn't answer. "Only until I finished what I came to do." Her tone was cold, measured, but charged with something deeper, resentment. "Your father," she began to say, "my father was a coward. He abandoned my mother when she needed him most. She got sick, she died without a dime, and meanwhile, you and your son were living surrounded by luxury, parties, trips. Do you know what it's like to watch your mother sewing until her fingers bled just to pay the rent, while the man who gave you life was toasting at a restaurant with his legal wife?" I couldn't answer. My lips trembled. She continued, each word a lash. "That's why I approached Marcus. That's why I accepted his love. Not for him, for justice." "Justice," I whispered. "Or revenge. Sometimes they are the same thing." I felt a pang in my chest, but not of guilt, of rage. Rage at Elijah for his silence, for the way his sin had germinated inside my own house. But above all, rage because Vanessa had used my son, my grandson, my entire family as an instrument of her revenge. "What was it you put in the casket?" I asked. She smiled ironically. "A memory." "What kind of memory?" "A photograph of my mother, so that wherever he is, he never forgets who he destroyed." I was speechless. The clarity of her hatred was more terrifying than any threat. There were no tears, no trembling, only a bitter peace on her face. "And what do you expect now?" I asked her. "Nothing from you. I already had what I wanted." "What?" "To see him dead and to see you confused." That night, I locked myself in my room. I was afraid, not just of her, but of myself, of what a wounded woman was capable of doing. Because although her story moved me, I couldn't forgive her for what she was doing to Marcus. He was innocent. He was a blind man, raised among appearances. I looked at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back had a pale face, tired eyes, but a new light in them, a determination I didn't remember ever feeling. I took the journal Elijah kept in his desk drawer. I had seen it 1,000 times but never opened it. This time, I did. Between the pages, I found a note written in faded ink. If Vanessa ever returns, do not confront her with hatred. She does not know the full truth. Serena did not die from my abandonment. She died because of what she wanted to hide. My skin crawled. I reread it, incredulous. What did he mean by that? What did Serena hide? And why did Elijah think his daughter would return? I realized that pieces were still missing from this puzzle, and that Vanessa was not the only one with secrets. Hatred mixes with fear, and fear with the need to know. And I couldn't stop myself anymore. Because when a woman discovers that she has lived a life built on lies, she no longer seeks comfort, she seeks truth. And I had a feeling the truth still had more to show me. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Elijah's face and Vanessa's cold gaze mingling in the same dream. The man I loved for 40 years had brought his own punishment into the house, wrapped in beauty, in feigned sweetness, in measured words. And I, fool that I was, had received her with open arms. But no more. Something inside me had awakened. A voice I didn't know, firm and sure, repeated tirelessly, "This time, you will be in control." I made coffee at dawn and waited. I knew Marcus would stop by to see me before going to work, as he did every Monday. I needed to see him. I needed to look him in the eyes and recognize how much damage they had done to him and how much was yet to come. When he arrived, he hugged me warmly. He didn't seem like the adult son he was, but a lost child seeking comfort. He had dark circles, slumped shoulders, a muffled voice. "I don't understand what's wrong with Vanessa, Mom. Since Dad died, she's been different, distant." "Maybe she just needs time," I said, measuring my words. "We all process grief in different ways," he sighed. "Last night, I heard her talking in her sleep. She was saying strange things, names I don't know." "What kind of names?" "Serena, Elijah, and something about what he owes me." My heart skipped a beat, but I hid it. "It's probably just dreams. You know, stress." I hugged him and stroked his head like when he was a child, but deep down, I knew I couldn't keep everything from him. Not yet. Not until I had proof. That morning, I made the hardest decision of my life. To play the same game as Vanessa, to disguise the truth, act calmly, smile while the fire grew beneath the table. If she wanted a war, she would have it, but on my terms. I started with something simple, inviting them to dinner over the weekend. I told them I wanted to thank them for being with me during these sad days. Vanessa immediately accepted, feigning sympathy. "Of course, Celeste. It will be nice to share a family meal again." Her smile didn't fool me. Behind it was a dark glint, a satisfaction that gave me chills. But I didn't show it. I looked at her with the same smile that grandmothers use when they already know everything and are just waiting for the right moment to speak. The days before the dinner were dedicated to planning. I discreetly contacted Attorney Lawson. I asked him to come to the house that night with the documents I had found in the bank and a copy of the original will. I also asked him for something else, to bring a handwriting expert. I didn't explain why. I just told him, "Trust me, attorney. What you are about to witness, you won't forget." And he, without fully understanding, agreed. The evening of the dinner, I set the table with ritualistic precision. The white china, the silver cutlery, the glasses Elijah used only on special occasions. Every detail had a purpose, every gesture a hidden meaning. When the clock struck 8, I heard the doorbell. Vanessa entered arm in arm with Marcus, dressed in an elegant black gown. She looked like a novel's grieving widow. "What a warm home you have, Celeste," she said as she took off her coat. "Thank you, dear," I replied sweetly. "I'm glad to see you in good spirits." We sat down to dinner. The atmosphere, though cordial, was charged with tension. Marcus tried to keep the conversation light, but Vanessa constantly interrupted him with calculated phrases, with innuendos disguised as affection. I watched her in silence, noting how her eyes darted toward the drawers, toward the corners, looking for something. While pouring the wine, I felt it was time. "Marcus, before we continue," I said calmly, "I want to tell you something." He looked at me, worried. What is it, Mom? I just want to thank you for being such a noble son. Not all men have the strength to face what you are about to discover. Vanessa put her glass down on the table. What does that mean? She asked, with a tone that mixed alarm and defiance. I stared at her, without blinking. It means the truth always comes to light, even if you bury it with a dead man. Marcus tensed. Mom, what are you talking about? About your father, son, and what he hid before he died. Vanessa abruptly stood up. This is absurd, she said. Don't start with stories now, Celeste. Stories, I replied with a smile, or truths you'd prefer not to hear. The silence was absolute. Then calmly, I took the folder from the bank out of a drawer and placed it on the table. You recognize this key, don't you? I asked. She paled. I don't know what you're talking about. It was the key you put in the casket, the same one that opened this box. Marcus looked at me, bewildered. What key, Vanessa? She didn't answer. In that box, I continued, I found a will. One where your father leaves everything to a woman named Serena Harper. Marcus froze. Who is that woman? Your wife could answer that better than I said, looking directly at Vanessa. Vanessa clenched her fists. What are you suggesting? Nothing you don't already know, I whispered. She stepped back, and then I knew I had hit the exact wound. No, daughter, I said. This is the truth. What truth? My mother died years ago. She has nothing to do with you. Oh, really? I opened the envelope and took out the photo. Then explain this. The photo fell onto the table. Marcus picked it up with trembling hands. What is this? Your father and Serena, and the girl you see there. My voice broke. That is Vanessa. He looked at his wife, pale, speechless. Is that true? He asked her. Vanessa, cornered, let the mask drop. Her voice changed. Yes, it's true, she said coldly. And I don't regret anything. Marcus stood up, incredulous. You lied to me. Your father ruined my mother's life. I only returned the favor. Her confession fell like thunder. I watched the collapse in silence. Inside, a part of me wept, but another, older and stronger, smiled, because finally the poison had come to the surface. The night after the dinner was the longest of my life. The silence in the house weighed down as if the walls had absorbed all the screams, all the tears, all the secrets revealed. Marcus had left without a word. Vanessa, after her confession, stormed out, leaving behind a bitter scent, a mix of perfume and revenge. I stayed alone, looking at the empty table. The photo was still there next to the half-empty glasses. The portrait of my husband with Serena and that child mingled with the reflection of the spilled red wine as if the past were bleeding onto the present. I knew I couldn't sleep. Not yet. I had to understand. I had to know why Elijah had allowed all this. I went up to his study. That place had always been his refuge. Perfectly aligned books, his polished desk, the lingering scent of ink and wood. I opened the drawers, looking for something more than answers. And there it was, the black notebook, the same journal I had seen so many times without daring to read. Now there was nothing left to lose. I sat in his chair and opened it. On the first page, his firm handwriting read, "If you are reading this, Celeste, it is because I am gone. Forgive me for what I hid, but there are truths that can destroy before they save. The story you think you know is neither mine nor yours." I felt a knot in my stomach. I turned the pages with trembling hands, and there it was, the name that haunted me, Serena Harper. I met Serena in 1979. It wasn't love, it was guilt. She worked cleaning my office. One night, after a party, I made the worst mistake of my life. I left her alone, and something happened to her. I didn't know what until years later. I brought a hand to my mouth. I couldn't believe what I was reading. I continued. When I learned she had a daughter, I wanted to take responsibility, but Serena never accepted my help. She told me she would rather die than let me into her life. I insisted. I sent her money in secret, but she disappeared. Years later, I found out she had died. but something about that story never sat right with me. I turned the page. Someone told me Serena didn't die, that she changed her identity and that the girl was raised by others, that the Harper surname was an invention, that everything was planned to get close to me, not to flee from me. My heart was beating so fast I could barely read. Then I reached the last entry. If Vanessa ever appears, don't hate her, but don't trust her either. Behind her is someone else, someone who knows my mistakes better than I do myself. If anything happens to me, look for the man with the black ring. He will know the truth. I snapped the journal shut. The air became dense. The man with the black ring. That phrase repeated in my head over and over. Who was he? And why was Elijah so afraid of his appearance? I spent the next few hours looking through old photos, documents, and invoices, and then I saw it. In a photograph from a bank event, Elijah posed with several partners. To the right, a man with a mustache and a dark ring on his right hand. His gaze gave me chills. On the back of the photo, in Elijah's handwriting, was a name, Harold Linton. I remembered Elijah mentioning him from time to time, but always evasively. He said he had been his friend, his partner in some deals, but I never saw him at home. And now, 30 years later, his name returned like a ghost. The next morning, I called Attorney Lawson. Attorney, does the name Harold Linton ring a bell? He was silent for a few seconds. Yes, he was a partner of your husband's many years ago. Is he still alive? As far as I know, yes, but... He hesitated. You shouldn't approach him, Miss Thacker. Why do you say that? That man is not trustworthy. After Elijah broke off relations with him, there were rumors, shady dealings, extortion, even threats. My skin prickled. Where does he live? I asked. On the outskirts, near the old warehouse where Elijah stored his things. But please, don't go alone. I hung up without answering. I knew I would go anyway. That afternoon, I took the bus to the industrial district. The warehouse was still there, old, rusty, overgrown with weeds. The wind carried dust and papers. I knocked on the door, my heart pounding like a drum. No one answered. I knocked again. Harold Linton, I called out. The door slowly opened, and there he stood, an older man with white hair and a shiny black ring on his hand. His gaze was hard, but not surprised. So you finally came, he said in a raspy voice. Elijah knew you would one day. I froze. Who are you? I asked. The one who knows why your husband died. The floor seemed to move beneath my feet. He died? I stammered. Elijah had a heart attack. The man let out a bitter laugh. Heart attack? No, Mrs. Thacker. What are you saying? I'm saying your husband was poisoned. My breath hitched. By whom? By the same person you think loved him. Vanessa? I asked. He shook his head. No, by someone who used her. Who? A woman named Serena. I felt a punch in the chest. That can't be. Serena is dead, right? His smile was chilling. Are you so sure? My world came crashing down. The air filled with echoes, with voices from the past, with the image of that photograph. Serena, the woman I thought was dead, was alive. And if she was, what role did she play in all this? I returned home trembling. I turned on all the lights. Even though it was the middle of the day, I couldn't stop thinking about that man's gaze, his black ring, the words he had said. Your husband was poisoned. And then I remembered something. One night before he died, Elijah had complained about a bitter taste in the tea that Vanessa prepared for him. She was caring for him those days because I was sick, and he had said between coughs, "It doesn't taste the same, but it doesn't matter, it's made with love." I closed my eyes and brought my hands to my mouth. The truth was revealed before me. Monstrous, impossible to deny. Elijah had been poisoned, and I, unknowingly, had lived under the same roof as his killer. But if Harold was right, Vanessa didn't act alone. Someone else was pulling her strings from the shadows. Serena, alive, still waiting for one last revenge. My heart was beating so hard, I thought it would break my chest. And in that moment, I knew. What was coming wasn't the end, it was the real beginning. There are silences that scream. That night mine was deafening. I walked through the house with the journal in my hand, reviewing every word, every trembling stroke of Elijah's handwriting. If anything happens to me, look for the man with the black ring. I had already done it, and what Harold Linton had told me kept repeating in my head. Your husband was poisoned, not by her, but by someone who used her. What if everything I thought I knew was just the surface? What if Vanessa had also been a pawn in a bigger game? I sat in the darkness in front of the wedding portrait that still hung in the living room. Elijah smiled, holding my hand. I looked at him with the faith that only women who believe in eternity have. Now I knew that eternity doesn't exist. Only the truths that no one wanted to see remain. The next morning, I received a call. It was Harold. His voice sounded grave, urgent. I found her, he said bluntly. Serena, what are you saying? She's alive, and she wants to see you. The ground seemed to open beneath my feet. Where? At the old Bayview Hotel tonight. But I warn you, don't go alone. Don't trust anyone. He hung up before I could answer. The silence that followed was a knife. As evening fell, I asked Marcus to come over. He had to know everything. I showed him the journal, the will, the photo, and told him what Harold had said. He listened without interrupting, pale, incredulous. Mom, he whispered at the end, are you sure they aren't manipulating you? I am, I replied firmly. But I won't stand by and do nothing. I saw the fear in his eyes. Let me come with you. No, son. If what I fear is true, I want you to stay away. I stroked his face. Promise me that no matter what happens, you won't see Vanessa again. He nodded, though there was pain in his eyes. I knew that promise would break his heart. I arrived at the hotel at 9 o'clock at night. The place seemed frozen in time. Damp walls, flickering lights, a smell of confinement and dust. The receptionist, an elderly man, pointed me to room 204. My footsteps echoed down the empty hallway. Every creak of the floor was a warning, every shadow a threat. I knocked on the door. A voice from inside said, "Come in, Celeste. I was expecting you." I entered. The room was dimly lit by an old lamp. By the window, a woman sat with her back to me. She had white, straight hair and a dark shawl over her shoulders. When she turned, I felt a shiver. It was Serena. Older, more fragile, but alive. Her eyes held the same sparkle as in the photograph. "So, it's you," I said, barely breathing. "Yes." Her voice was soft, but firm. "And you are the wife, the widow," I corrected. We looked at each other in silence. For a moment, only the weight of the decades that separated us existed, and the shadow of a dead man between the two of us. "Your husband was a coward," she said bluntly. "And you, a shadow that never left," I replied. She smiled sadly. "Don't blame me, Celeste. He destroyed my life, and my son's life too. And yours? What did you gain from all this?" "Justice," she whispered. "You call poisoning a man and using your own daughter to do it justice?" Serena lowered her gaze. "It wasn't me." "What? It wasn't me who killed him?" Her confession paralyzed me. "Then who?" The door burst open. Vanessa entered, her eyes full of tears and a pistol in her hand. "Me!" she screamed. "It was me, Mom!" The echo of her voice filled the room. Serena stood up, trembling. "Vanessa, no!" "Yes," she sobbed. "You made me do it. You made me hate him. You made me believe he ruined your life, but you were the one who destroyed him first." Serena tried to approach. "Daughter, don't you understand? Elijah threatened to take you away from me. I did it out of fear." "Lies," Vanessa screamed. "You always lie." The trembling of her hands was dangerous. "Put the gun down," I said, taking a step forward. "Don't come near me," she yelled. You're not innocent either. You lived his lie." For an instant, I thought she would shoot, but instead, her body collapsed. She fell to her knees, crying, screaming her mother's name. Serena ran to her, hugging her. I stood watching that broken scene, mother and daughter in tears and guilt. Everything that hatred had built was crumbling before me. Minutes later, the police arrived. Someone had called, maybe Harold. They took Vanessa away without resistance. Serena looked at me before they handcuffed her too. "Don't hate her, Celeste. It's my fault. It's all three of us," I told her. Because sin is committed not only by the one who wounds, but also by the one who keeps quiet. On the way back home, the dawn found me on the porch. The cool wind hit my face. For the first time in months, I breathed without fear. I had lost a husband, a daughter-in-law, almost a son, but I had gained something more valuable, the truth. And the truth, even if it hurts, sets you free. I took Elijah's journal one last time. On the last page I wrote, "Sometimes justice comes not with screams, but with silence. And forgiveness is not for the one who asks for it, but for the one who no longer wants to carry the weight of hatred." I closed the notebook. The sun began to rise, painting the walls of the house gold, and I felt that finally, after so much pain, I could rest. 6 months have passed since that night at the hotel. Sometimes I still wake up to the sound of Vanessa's scream in my ears. Sometimes I think I hear the shot that never went off because I contained it with my voice, with my presence, with the only thing I could still offer, my compassion. Since then, time has taken its course, but my life changed forever. The garden has bloomed again, though not the same. The wind smells different, and every corner of the house holds an echo of what was. There isn't a day that I don't look at Elijah's portrait and wonder if, in some corner of the afterlife, he watches me, repentant. I have learned that truth does not arrive when we look for it, but when we are prepared to bear it. And I, unknowingly, had spent my whole life preparing for that moment. Vanessa was sentenced to 20 years in prison, not for the murder. The forensic report never definitively proved the poisoning was fatal, but for fraud, identity theft, and document manipulation. Serena, her mother, was also charged, although due to her advanced age and health condition, she is under house arrest. Marcus, my son, was never the same. The day the police took his wife away, he fell to his knees in front of me. "I don't understand, Mom," he said, his voice broken. "Why? Why all of this?" I hugged him, and I didn't know what to answer, because deep down, I don't fully understand it either. Hatred is a silent inheritance. It is transmitted without words, like a shadow passing from one generation to another. And sometimes, when you don't stop it in time, it ends up devouring everything it touches. Marcus decided to leave the city. He calls me once a week, but his voice sounds distant, tired. I don't blame him. His soul is broken, and every word of mine reminds him of the pain he tried to bury. I also thought about leaving, to abandon this house, this neighborhood, this country if necessary. But then I understood that fleeing is not healing. Healing is staying, facing the echo of the past and learning to live with it. So I stayed. I have dedicated my days to restoring the small things that used to give me peace. Painting the walls, caring for my plants, writing. I have filled entire notebooks with my story, not for me, but for those who come after. I want any woman like me, a wife, a mother, a grandmother, who feels her life crumbling because of a betrayal, to be able to read my words and know that survival is possible. 2 weeks ago, I received a letter. It was from Attorney Lawson. Inside, a yellowed envelope sealed with Elijah's handwriting. My heart leaped. It read, "Celeste, if this letter reaches you, it is because the truth has come to light. Don't seek to forgive me, just to understand me. I never loved Serena as I loved you. It was a mistake, one I dragged my whole life. But when I found out I had a daughter, I wanted to help, even if in secret. I never imagined that attempt at redemption would destroy us. If there is anything after death, I hope to see you there to tell you with my own lips what my cowardice prevented me from saying in life. I loved you. Always. Elijah. I read that letter over and over until it was soaked with tears. I didn't forgive him in that instant, but I understood something that freed me. Love doesn't always save, but forgiveness does. Forgiving him wasn't justifying him. It was letting go of the weight that was sinking me. Sometimes, when evening falls, I go out to the porch with a blanket over my shoulders and look at the horizon. The sky takes on that orange and violet color that Elijah loved so much. And although I know he is gone, sometimes I talk to him anyway, in a low voice. I tell him about the garden, about the rose bushes that bloomed again, about the birds nesting in the old lemon tree. I tell him that I miss him, but that I no longer need him to breathe. The first time I could say that without feeling guilt, I knew I had finally healed. I also think of Vanessa, of her eyes full of rage the last day I saw her. I don't hate her. I know her story was written by others before she could choose. She was a child of abandonment, of resentment, of silence, and those are cruel parents. I sent a letter to the prison, not to reproach her, but to tell her that hatred is inherited, but it can also be broken. I wrote to her, "You were raised in the shadow, Vanessa, but you can still learn to see the light. Not mine, nor your mother's, but your own. When you find it, you will understand that you were not born to destroy, but to heal what the past stole from you." I don't know if she read it. I don't know if she will ever answer me, but I needed to write it, because there are wounds that only words can heal. Recently, the lawyer visited me again. He brought another safety deposit box in Elijah's name. I didn't know whether to open it. I was afraid to start the cycle of pain all over again, but I did it. Inside were 3 things: a photo of the 3 of them, Elijah, Serena, and Vanessa as a child, a small silver cross, and a note that read, "If you read this, it is because everything has come to light. Thank you for taking care of everyone, even those who didn't deserve it. Forgive my silence. Now you can live without me." I didn't cry for the first time. I just smiled with a strange new peace. It was as if Elijah's soul had finally let go of my hand. That night, I slept profoundly. I dreamed of him, not on his deathbed, nor as the man who lied to me, but as the young man who took me dancing in the rain the day he proposed. In the dream, he looked at me and said, "That's it, Celeste. Everything has been paid for." I woke up with tears, but also with relief. The price of the truth had been high. I lost my husband, my son, my daughter-in-law, but I gained something I thought was impossible for decades: my freedom. The freedom to be me, without fear, without appearances, without lies. The freedom to look back without bitterness and forward without expectation. The freedom just to live. I am Celeste Thacker, and this was my story.